Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, third video. So let me start with, one, maybe two questions. First question, what did Mr. Darcy think of Lizzie's coming to Mr. Bingley's house that way, you know, on foot and etc.? Answer, we can feel from the beginning of the chapter that he's a little bit, still hasn't decided, but one thing is sure, there is a bad side to it. He would never want his sister to do such a thing, right? His sister is much more classy as to do something like that. Okay. When Lizzie didn't, you know, obey the rules, like taking a carriage, I don't know, doing all the formalities, what was she not respecting? Answer, she was not respecting the decorum. All right. Okay. Then we go to the question with which I finished my last video. For that, to answer that question, oh, first of all, if you know how to answer, please answer. All right. Even if you don't know the complete answer. Okay. I think there is a note I put in our Quizlet there that will help a lot. A note on Cheapside. Okay. It will help us understand not only Cheapside, but the whole mood of this kind of society here. All right. So, historically, Cheapside was the financial center of London, associated with banking and trade. So far, if you think about it and you say, wow, so it should be respected, those guys, you know, why are they using that to say that Jane has such low connections? Because of what is coming now. So it's associated with banking and trade, and thus people who made their livelihood through those professions. The concept of working for a living was looked down upon by people who inherited their wealth and their wealth and source of income, which was mainly based on land. Okay, so this society here, even though the Bennets are, let's say, among the lowest in the society, they're still, you know, part of this top society. Let me see how far will I go with my explanation. Keep in mind that top society doesn't mean that they had more power than, for example, a banker. All right. Top society when it comes to reputation. Okay, so after all, you are part of nobility. Okay, but of course we are in this period where there is been this kind of transitions, right? The bourgeois, you know, the people with money, they're getting more and more power, right? And the nobility, you know, is going lower and lower and lower. So there is this very, I don't know if you ever thought about it, this very interesting period. For example, they look down on a banker, you know. Of course, it's not the case of Mr. Bingley, and certainly not the case of Mr. Darcy, but, you know, maybe you are a person from that society. I don't know, the younger sisters, who are completely full, according to the father, right? They would look down maybe on a banker, you know, because they are part of this lower class, the class of business people, but they wouldn't have not even close to as much money as, you know, a banker would have, you know. So it's interesting. So in many cases they had the name, but they didn't have the money. All right, and then what will happen? Again, another digression. At this time, very frequently, you know, a person with a name, you know, and with nobility, but with no money at all, would marry a very rich guy with no name, you know. So I would say the money would like give some extra energy to the name, and of course the guy would get some title, you know, the rich guy would get some title, and that's good. So I guess it's a win-win in the end, I don't know. Okay, continuing the reading. Based on land. This was the aristocracy and the landed gentry, which included the Bingley and the Darcy families. The concept was very much class-based. Bankers and merchants were seen as belonging to a lower class, and socially not to be mingled, not to be mixed with, and their progeny definitely not eligible to be joined in marriage, right? I'm not going to marry, you know, a guy who works for a living. Except in there, and here is where the hypocrisy comes in, except where their health could resuscitate the fortunes of a family whose wealth had been depleted. You know, you have this family, they never work, they spend all of their money because their property doesn't give that much of a profit, and then a wealthy guy could resuscitate that. But be careful, okay? Be careful, because some people would look at aristocracy and saying, oh, see, they're evil, they're using, you know, other guys because of their money, right? No, right? As I told you, you know, the guy full of money is also using the aristocratic family to get a name, all right? So be careful with concepts of oh, poor guy, the guy that is being exploited. Be very careful with that. Okay, so let's continue our reading. I think I have heard you say that their uncle is an attorney in Meryton. Yes, and they have another who lives somewhere in Cheapside. That is capital, added her sister, and they both laughed heartily. If they had uncles enough to fill all Cheapside, cried Bingley, it would not make them one jot less agreeable. Jot is one speck, one you know, one little tiny bit, right? One particle is the other word I have here. Keep in mind, I hope you haven't forgot it, right? You haven't forgotten it. He was not crying with tears, right? When the, you know, Jane Austen and many books, most of the time when the book says cry, it means that to speak with emotion. That's maybe when it comes to literature, this is the primary meaning for cry, right? Weep would be our regular cry we say every day, like shed tears, right? Okay, so maybe they can have like loads of uncles that can fill Cheapside, cried Bingley. It would not make them one jot less agreeable, but it must very materially lessen their chance of marrying men of any consideration in the world, replied Darcy. Darcy said that, and he is right. Okay, the fact that they don't have good connections, the fact that they have, you know, low family, lessen, look at what Darcy said, but it must very materially lessen their chance of marrying men of any consideration in the world. And of course, consideration, we're referring to nobility here, right? To this speech, Bingley made no answer, but his sisters gave it their hearty assent, and indulged their mirth for some time at the expense of their dear friend's vulgar relation, right? Keep in mind, mirth is this amusement, especially when you are laughing at a person. With the renewal of tenderness, however, they returned to her room on leaving the dining parlor and sat with her till summoned to coffee. Ah, okay, all right. So, who are they talking about? Or who is the narrator talking about? The renewal of tenderness. Tenderness for what? Answer? They're talking about Jane, right? Because they're talking about Jane, and I don't know if they felt, at first I thought it was very strange, if they felt, I don't know, guilty, maybe, or just because they were talking about her, but there was a renewal of tenderness. And then they returned to her room on leaving the dining parlor. They left the dining parlor, different constructions, right? Construction, right? On leaving. So on leaving the dining parlor, when they left the dining parlor, they returned to her room and sat with her until summoned to coffee. She was still very poorly, and Elizabeth would not quit her at all, till late in the evening, when she had the comfort of seeing her sleep, and when it seemed to her rather right than pleasant that she should go downstairs herself. Explain to me this part. And it seemed to her rather right than pleasant that she should go downstairs herself. Answer. The answer is, she realized that it was the right thing to do to go downstairs. But she thought it was much more just a right thing to do, like an obligation, than pleasant. Okay? So, let me read now with the context. When she had the comfort of seeing her sleep, okay, Lizzie saw her sister fell asleep, and when it seemed to her rather right than pleasant that she should go downstairs herself. On entering the drawing room, again this nice construction, right? On entering instead of when she entered. Okay. On entering the drawing room is like a living room. It would be a room. I put in somewhere here in Quizlet. I put a picture of a drawing room. Oh yeah, here. I tried to find a formal one in a beautiful, a little bit older house for you to have a nice notion and connect it with the story here. Let me give you the definition I wrote here. A room in a large private house in which guests can be received and entertained. All right. So let's go back. On entering the drawing room, she found the whole party at loo and was immediately invited to join them. Be careful, because if I'm not wrong, do that experience. Let me see if it will work. Just spell loo, L-O-O, right? And put in Google image. You will find a lot of toilet. And then be careful, because this would be a very strange sentence, wouldn't it? You know? On entering the drawing room, she found the whole party at loo. My friend, there is the moment where I help you. Loo, and this I put in our Quizlet, is a kind of card game as well as an informal way of calling the bathroom. It's a gambling card game, right? When you gamble, you play anything for money, okay? So that's what happened. So when she entered there, she found the whole group at loo and was immediately invited to join them. But suspecting them to be playing high, she declined it. Question. Oh, what does she mean by playing high? Answer. If you keep in mind that they're playing a gambling game, they're playing betting money. But they're extremely rich, and Lizzie is not, right? So if she played, I don't know, she could lose her father's horse on that game. And of course it would be very embarrassing for her not to be able to take the bets and things like that. And was immediately invited to join them, but suspecting them to be playing high, she declined it. And making her sister the excuse, said she would amuse herself for the short time she could stay below with a book. Mr. Hurst looked at her with astonishment. "Do you prefer reading to cards?" said he. "That is rather singular." "Miss Eliza Bennet," said Miss Bingley, "despises cards. She is a great reader and has no pleasure in anything else." "I deserve neither," Lizzie saying now, "I deserve neither such praise nor such censure," cried Elizabeth. "I am not a great reader, and I have pleasure in many things." Because there was a praise. The praise was... What was the praise? She reads a lot. She's very well informed. And there was a censure. What was the censure? She didn't have pleasure in anything else. And then she says, "No, I'm not that great of a reader, and I have pleasure in other things."